Hello everybody. So in this video we're going to be learning how to do frame-by-frame animation on Adobe Animate. The very first thing that we have to do before we get started is we have to go up to our window menu up here, and there's just three things that we have to make sure have check marks next to it. Timeline, tools, and properties. So if you notice that you are missing one of these three things, please click on it and make sure that they have little check marks next to their name because we're going to be using all three of those. Alright, so now we're just going to jump right into it. What I want you guys to do is I want you to check out the toolbar. So you're going to notice that there are two different types of brush tools. There is the fluid brush tool and the classic brush tool. They are slightly different. We're going to go over the fluid brush tool first. So you'll notice that when you switch between the two, the properties panel changes, and when you're on the fluid brush tool, it gives you a lot more freedom to change what the brush looks like. So right now when I'm drawing, I definitely have a little bit of an angle on my brush, right? So that's one of the things that you can customize. There's just a bunch of things that you can really mess around with on here. Obviously size is the most basic one, but it's definitely worth checking this out if you like having that freedom. So that's really the big difference between the fluid brush tool and the classic brush tool. The classic brush tool really only lets you change two things, which is size and smoothing. One big difference between the fluid brush tool and the classic brush tool is the way that the fluid brush tool allows you to be custom, but it doesn't really fix anything for you. Whereas if I go in with my classic brush tool and then I draw, notice how it kind of cleans up those edges for you a little bit, smooths everything out a little bit. That does kind of come in this smoothing option right here. So right now smoothing is at 100%. You could change that if you wanted, but why would you? If you're using the classic brush tool, you're probably looking for that nice clean line effect that it offers. Okay, so I just undid all those lines. Now what I want to do is I want to direct your attention up to the timeline. And we talked a little bit about the timeline before, but now we're going to get really more in depth because we're going to be using the timeline a lot on Adobe Animate. So, first of all, I want you guys to check this out. So there's a couple, or not a couple, there's a lot of little rectangles. And you'll notice that the rectangle that this little blue arrow, or I guess you can say like pointy edge, is pointing to is this gray one that has a little circle in it, but the circle is empty. Now, what that means is, that means there is one blank keyframe. The rest of these are just kind of like placeholders right here, but this is one blank keyframe. And watch what happens when I draw on the preview screen. It fills it up, makes it a light gray, and it fills up that little black circle. So that is a keyframe that has something in it. So now we know the difference between an empty keyframe and a filled keyframe. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to start by drawing one big green glob. I'm going to fill it in all the way. Okay. And that's going to be our starting point. Now, if I want to make a new frame, I have to go over to my timeline, and then I'm going to right-click the empty placeholder area, and this can get a little bit confusing because there's insert frame, there's insert keyframe, and there's insert blank keyframe. We want to insert a blank keyframe, so let's click that. Okay. Now that we have a blank keyframe, we want to continue on with this animation. However, right now, I have literally no idea where the last one started unless I go back. So this is where this awesome tool called Onion Skin comes in. And Onion Skin you can find up here. And I always like to turn Onion Skin on because what happens is it allows you to see where your last frame was in kind of like this ghost capacity, which makes it really easy when you're doing frame by frame animation. Okay, so now I have frame 1 and frame 2. Alright, so now I know how to continue adding blank keyframes. So I'm going to insert blank keyframe, and I'm just going to do this a few more times. Alright, so I just added a bunch of blobs, and I made it so that it kind of moves, changes shape a little bit, and then starts moving upward. Now, there's definitely a couple things that you guys are going to want to know before moving on. For example, let's say you get a frame kind of like this, where it gets a little bit wonky. You're like, I think I want to redo that one. Or let's say you just want to like delete a frame altogether. What you would do is you would right click that keyframe, and there's a couple of different options. So you can remove the frame, and to do that, you just right click it, and then it kind of like moves all of your frames inward. I'm going to undo that. Another thing that you can do is you can go to clear frame, which will essentially make it an empty frame again, which allows you to redraw it all together. This is not to be mistaken with clear keyframe, which when you click that, it'll basically just delete that keyframe and connect it to the one before. So it'll make two of the keyframes exactly the same. Okay, perfect. So now I feel like we're ready to actually preview. So I always recommend turning off onion skin while you're previewing, and you can click play or enter on your keyboard, and you can actually watch the animation. You can also preview the animation a little bit more easy by holding down Command Return. And what it does is it exports a file, and then you can really see like a good preview of it. And this shows you it in real speed also, right? So if you feel like, oh wait, this is going way too fast, I need to go a little bit slower, then you know you have to add a couple more keyframes into the mix. Alright guys, so that is really the basics of frame by frame animation. I hope you have fun with it, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.